This week's flagship podcast looks at the fading state of what used to be the cable companies. Now they are much different than just mere cable providers. What Perry Sook and Nexstar really mean for local broadcast journalism, more real world numbers about the real value of the NFL versus the increasingly ignored entertainment programming that those broadcast networks carry. What people in various countries like to watch the most, overpaid media execs, Microsoft's return to Xbox, and Sora's possible comeback amid AI's real problem. Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom with Next TMT, and this here podcast, Next TMT Talks. I am here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, as we talk all things technology, media, and telecom. It has been quite the week as we are slowly coming out of the post-NAB coma I think we both endured, as did our beloved producer, and possibly also my spouse, so she looked pretty sprightly, I have to say. Welcome, Daniel. What's up with you?
That NAB coma is real.
The coma is real.
The Las Vegas Convention Center, as you well know, is it's a rough place.
Yeah. And they weren't even in South Hall. They were just in the northern, western three, Central Hall, North Hall, and West Hall, the new space. It could have been so much worse. But the coma is right. I'm feeling much more lively today than I was when we recorded on Wednesday, when I had just driven back 4 hours plus from Vegas to Santa Monica, and you had, I guess, left.
Sir. That's rough.
Yeah, it was rough, but we managed to pull it out, and we're here. We are here. I do think there was some stuff that I didn't get to, the Perry Sook conversation with Deborah Norville, veteran broadcaster herself.
Yeah, I'm glad you drilled in on it. Dade Hayes at Deadline did a little something on it. We kind of glossed over on Thursday's issue, but you kind of drilled down on what he said, and we had some clips. Go ahead.
Well, I think what kind of got me going, Tim Hanlon, a beloved reader of this podcast, former colleague of both of us, had a point about some of what Dade wrote, saying, thanks, Dade, great coverage, great clear-eyed coverage, but here's what Perry Sook is calling for, and that is the ability to buy up not just a bunch of stations, but up to 3 stations in a market. And no, he would not lay off all the journalists, but he would consolidate all the back office operations, which makes me go, okay, are you going to have a separate news editor who's expensive? I mean, a newsroom news director. Are you going to have separate assignment editors making assignments for different stories? Maybe, but probably not, because you're not going to send the same crew from 2 different stations to cover the same thing. You're not going to have competition.
It is going to homogenized broadcast.
Yeah, you'll have homogenized stuff, and on top of that, you might have 3 stations, all of them carrying the News Nation podcast, or newscast, national newscast, which is fine. But if it's the only one on 3 of the networks or 3 of the stations in town, boy, that's not much for diversity or distinctive voices and programming, and that's where he's headed. So Tim's point, and I think it's spot on, is it is not the prescription for consolidation, is not the prescription for saving local broadcast. It is a prescription for increasing irrelevance. The thing that makes these stations worthwhile is that interesting weather person, or the anchor that you've come to love over the years, who's an institution in town. And I say this as somebody who's been around broadcast people. I spent 10 years with 2 people who worked in the business, and some of those anchors are like local deities. I mean, they get asked to sign autographs, for God's sakes, and they're doing community stuff.
AMBC had this little ongoing feud between sports guy Stu Nahat, who was in the Rocky movies. You may know him.
Yeah, I remember Stu. Yeah, sure.
And Pat Sajak, pre Wheel of Fortune, he was the weather guy. And they culminated it with them doing this interstitial promoting the newscast one night. They both were arm in arm. I'll have the sports and I'll have the weather, like they were buddies. It was just classic. You had to tune it because they were kind of hamming it up. But you became friends with these people. It was.
Well, you certainly have a relationship. You have this parasocial relationship, I think, is the term we now use in an era of social media, where with podcasts and with these big online YouTube stars, you think you have a relationship with them. And one could argue that there are many people who feel that way toward our only president. And given his omnipresence on social media, there are a lot of folks who think they know him. and they connect with him. And that's not always positive, but it's certainly powerful. But I mean, the bigger point is that it is not, they've sort of clothed themselves in the platitudes of we're preserving local journalism. And I think Tim's point is really well taken. It's like not so much as you try to get your company bigger to try to hang on as best you can and milk as much money as you can out of it because you've got your personal fortune
Yeah, that's
tied into
all
these things.
cronyism, FCC style
Yeah.
cronyism.
Yeah.
What I
Well,
really
yeah.
thought was funny was when Sook talks about the blue state politics that are driving this lawsuit, that all the AGs that are suing over the merger are from blue
Yeah.
state, and that it's an election year, blah, blah, blah. It's, oh, come on. This case with DirecTV's a part of it too. It received something that's hard to get, a preliminary injunction. You did,
Temporary restraining order, technically, but yes.
unless you really are cynical and everything's rigged, that's not your way. Judges have to play by certain rules, and if you win a preliminary injunction, your case must have some merit to it. That's all I got to say.
Well, real judges play by real rules. That's the thing. That's kind of what judges are supposed to do. And most of them, nearly all of them, are pretty good about that. I mean, they're the referees of our system and make it possible to be what it is. So, yeah, they're not just making stuff up for political purposes. I mean, we typically see these notes that so-and-so was a Reagan appointee. There were less and less of those anymore, or a Bush appointee, or a Bush 2 appointee, or a Clinton appointee, or an Obama appointee, or a Trump appointee. And sometimes he's actually lost. The Trump administration has lost a lot of cases to Trump appointed judges from both Trump 1 and now Trump 2, because they tend to
There are
step on the
rules
rules.
to this thing. Law and order.
Out of this, though, part of what they've been doing is saying you got to preserve local journalism by preserving local NFL broadcasts free over the air, which is another way to say that without that, we got nothing.
And they get up.
And you point to Rich Greenfield's study over there at Lightshed Advisors about NFL's only getting bigger. And by the way, they had 805,000
No, it wasn't his
people.
study. It was the presentation that Hawk Schroeder, the NFL's media chief, brought into the FCC last week.
Okay, so he did a little deeper dive on it.
We had it on
Yeah.
Thursday, yeah, and they show broadcast ratings over the last 25 years without sports in them.
Yeah, take out sports.
NFL ratings up 30% over the same span. Greenfield sort of extrapolated off that and said, why are broadcast networks in the general entertainment area anymore? It's expensive.
Right.
They're not going to be an audience off of it. Maybe it should all just
Sometimes their ratings busts. Occasionally you'll get tracker, but they're right. But I mean, just an example of how nuts people are about the NFL. Again, during the draft this week, 3 days of draft, which is waiting around for some team to say, we're going to pick this young man over that young man to somehow transform our team.
You see
or not.
Bill Burr's take on the draft? It's a list. You can read it the next day. It's kind of ridiculous.
It is kind of ridiculous. But listen, more than 800,000 people went to see that in person. God knows what the ratings were, but they were probably better than most of the NBA games in the playoffs that are playing this week. Almost certainly higher ratings.
The Rams head coach sit there and try to control his temper as they select a quarterback for the future who's arguably may not be the quarterback of the future, Ty Simpson of Alabama. I'm not a huge believer. Over Mekhi Lemon, of USC, the receiver, that can make them a contender right now. I mean,
I just want to point out, they were already a contender. They made it to the title, the conference championship game, and they are the favorite to win this year. They're already a title contender.
I don't care. Mekhi Lemon would have put him over the top, but this is a different
Love Mekhi Lemon, fantastic player, Blitnikoff winner, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. They got 2 all-pros already there. Puka Nakua's got some legal problems. Devonta Adams is getting older, but they are all pro. Both of them. Mekhi Lemon would be the 3rd or 4th or 5th receiver. So get the guy as high as you can who's a high functioning processor, which is the hardest thing to do in the NFL. I totally understand their reasoning. It's fine. They say they're aligned. Who cares? Doesn't matter. But, you got to have drama. And if the team most likely to contend for the Super Bowl does something that no one expects, thank God, it is so overcovered. This draft thing is gigantic. I mean, and again, 800,000 people got up in Pittsburgh or drove to Pittsburgh or flew to Pittsburgh to go watch and wait for Roger Goodell to come out and say, this team has picked this young man. Congrats. Now let's wait 15 more minutes. This team has picked this young man, which you may or may not know, for 3 days. Yes. And fetishists will pay good money, whether they're married to a cabinet secretary or just watching the NFL. And so there's that. But, what's interesting to me is really the point that the NFL programming is so incredibly powerful and only getting more so. And the question was, if the entertainment stuff is getting less and less ratings, drawing fewer and fewer viewers, and the sports stuff is still going up and up and up, why are you
Plus,
still in
when
entertainment?
the FCC, yeah, it's a point that others have made. Laura Martin, your bomb-throwing good friend a few months ago.
Well,
Yes,
her point was,
it's a little different, right?
get out of broadcast, still
Altogether.
do the feeds, your full range of feeds. Just say, take your thing. We don't need it, you know, which is slightly different. It's like, still do Tracker, still do Abbott Elementary, still do 500 NCIS shows or Law and Order shows. Still do all that, but just put it out on abc.com. It's like, who needs a headache? Let Jimmy Kimmel rake Trump over the coals until he gets tired and goes home to do barbecues 6 days a week, which was her point.
Or
But
if I
yours
know,
is just get
you know,
out of entertainment.
and I kind of tried to make a point. I don't know if anybody might have flown over everybody said. It's like the Sharks and the Jets, in the old West
Right.
Side rivalry. A format is your identity, and you can't break out of that identity. A lot of people we're broadcast. Does it really matter? You're in the content business and you deliver content. And what does it matter if it's over IP or broadcast? I was shocked at the number of people that really matters to them at an AP.
Well, and part of why this matters is you point out in the lead story in our flagship weekly podcast, weekly newsletter, available alongside this podcast in your mailbox every week for free. So sign up at nextcmt.com.
Lots of
You point out,
theater. I mean,
yeah,
we're patrons. We support it.
right.
No, I never
But
watched.
you point out that Charter and Spectrum, Charter Spectrum, sorry, and Comcast, the thing that they're known for, the thing that we think of them as, is the thing they're not doing great on, which is basically high speed connectivity. They continue to see things kind of shrink. It's just eating away, just eroding.
Right. Well, we're not making the point that those companies are going away. They're here to stay. But we are saying that the
But
thing
they
that
may stay together. That's what you were
people are
suggesting.
talking about that during Q1 earnings this week. Both companies reported, and Chris Winfrey, the Sharp CEO for Charter, said, "Yeah, we're open."
Don't you mean the Shark CEO?
Yeah, you got the Jets over in Philadelphia.
Yeah, over in Philadelphia, the Jets, totally the Jets. But they're like, no, we're the Eagles, not the Jets. Green and white, but still, we're not the Jets.
Talks. And Winfrey said, we're bullish on cable. You didn't mention anything specifically, but says we're open to buying more cable. Mike Kavanaugh compensated to the tune of $71 million last year. We'll get to that in a second.
Co-president. He's not even a whole president. He's half a president or half a CEO.
He said, we got to solve the negativity issue around cable right now. He didn't take the bait. But it's interesting. Both companies 5 years ago during the pandemic, 6 years ago now, I guess, they were growing gangbusters in terms of their core business, high-speed internet for the home and business. They haven't really grown that business in the last 6 years. Fiber started to get built out. It's a really good product. And cell phone internet, basically the internet over wireless, has come in. It's half the price. It's reliable for a lot of people. And it's undercut.
It's enough, right? It's enough for a lot of folks.
And now you've got Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos peddling satellite internet, which is favored by the FCC. And it's a lot of competition. Both companies are still losing broadband subscribers every month. They have these wireless businesses that are growing, but they're still nascent. They control a tiny percentage of the nearly 600 million connections nationwide. And video will never be a thing for them. It was rescued from the dead at Charter due to this sort of innovative SVOD distribution strategy we talked about ad nauseum, but it's still a mechanism to move the primary driver, which is broadband. So if these two companies were to merge, which has been talked about openly and now has gained some credibility, you'd have this powerful connectivity company that has almost national footprint because their footprints are distinct, they're regional monopolies.
Yeah, they've worked very hard to not overbuild or I mean, like, you get LA, you get San Diego, you get Las Vegas, you get Atlanta, boom, 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 and they've split this all up. You're in New York, I've got Chicago, but you can have those suburbs over there, it's pooling the stuff together, but they're a monopoly, but just not overlapping
And then you'd have
monopolies.
like the gravity of that would pull in a bunch of tier 1, 2, and tier 3 operators. And you'd have this big supersize telecommunications company that delivers home internet, wireless, general connectivity, competing with AT&T and T and everybody else who does that. And it would be a very competitive, very compelling company. But would you call it cable anymore? I mean, it delivers its content over wireless. It delivers it.
Like, it's the smallest part of what it is, but it's the thing that it's the original DNA as it's glommed on all these other things, right?
Right.
So,
To me, it makes more sense than allowing station owners to like assert the cap. I mean, it's if the FCC wants to approve something, it would make sense to do it now.
right.
You still have Brendan Carr in there, and you can get a lot of shit done.
Yeah. Whatever those little law things are, just go ahead. Can't be a problem. It's really interesting to think about that sort of reshaping on corners like that. Uh, beyond all this, I had a little graphic from the Privacy Journal about what people watch, like the dominant genre that people watch on streaming. And no shock for a country headed by a former reality TV star, this country loves drama. And boy, do we love drama. But so does most of the rest of the Western Hemisphere, except two of the biggest markets in Latin America, Brazil and Mexico.
They don't like
And
drama?
I understand completely why Mexico loves horror because they've got Guillermo del Toro putting out
I thought they
amazing
started
stuff.
it
I
all.
just saw Del Toro he's doing a Patron commercial now that includes like Day of the Dead skeletons in the bar drinking with GDT, one of the great directors of our era. And so he even does like tequila commercials now. But they're big on horror. As they say in France, but drama for most of the rest of the Western Hemisphere. And I'm not sure what that means other than telenovelas rule most of Latin America and a good chunk of America too. So
Yeah.
anyway, but I thought that was interesting.
That's a good
What?
situation for, Benicio
Yeah,
to be in. A couple of markets, you get a little
Guillermo del Toro, not Benicio, but yes,
Guillermo.
Guillermo. Yes, he owns Mexico along with a couple other great Iñárritu and Alfonso Cuarón. That's a trio for the ages. They've each won Oscars for their films and should have. And they all have Emmanuel Lubezki as their cinematographer, who won Best Cinematographer 3 years in a row at the Oscars. That's a pretty good run. And they're with different directors each time.
We didn't talk about the issue, but how about this Michael biopic? It has horrible reviews, but nobody seems to care. Kind of like
No, some of those reviews are really good. Like Wall Street Journal gave it an excellent review. Michael's nephew, the son of Jermaine, I believe, plays Michael at a very high level and gets the dancing and the voice and some of that down. And he got an excellent review. I think the real problem that a lot of the reviews have is the movie more than not only
glosses
soft
over
pedals, just ignores all the abuse allegations, stops before the abuse allegations
all that
start to
stuff's
kick
been
in.
disproved. So
It has not. There's some pretty compelling lawsuits that were successfully prosecuted that suggest widespread problematic behavior with young boys that's just awful. And that being said, the estate and many, many relatives of Michael Jackson are executive producers on this film. Antoine Fuqua is the director, a fantastically talented director of action films. So it was a little bit of an unusual choice, but
he
he's
did
a
Training Day, did
gifted. He did Training Day and much else. He's a very good action director.
Yeah, he is.
But it's a bit of a stretch for him to do really a musical biopic. You know, Fuqua's really an interesting director. More importantly, there are Jackson family members all connected into this film. The estate is making money off of it, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what we expected. It is a highly entertaining film by all accounts, according to the reviews, but it is obviously at the same time a document that's designed to elide the highly well-documented problems that Michael Jackson caused to young victims who were in his orbit as he kind of cartwheeled into his later years. The film stops, I think, in 83 or something like that. Before all that stuff gets going, they don't give nearly enough credit to Quincy Jones, which is really a crime because Quincy Jones, one of the musical giants of the 20th century, and who was essential to guiding Michael into his adult musical career and move past his father's own very big thumb on Michael's life and soul into the Michael who became a superstar. And the Journal said probably the only equivalent in terms of a compelling musical performer was Elvis Presley, and I think I'd probably have to agree with that in terms of
Yeah, there
their
was that
just
moment right after
like
Off the Wall that, was transcendent. It was. So, it's worth a biopic. Would I prefer the gentle, creative hand of Hulu, maker of Love Story, handle the project? Maybe.
yeah, but they'd be doing as a love story between Michael and some of his child fans, and that would be so
Yeah,
terrible
yeah.
in so many ways. It wouldn't run on Disney though, I can say that pretty safely. You know, it's interesting because this is one of those places where it gets difficult to evaluate the criticism of the film because there's valid critiques about the absence of any mention of egregious, horrible crimes, separate from the dynamic, extraordinary biopic of one of the great musical artists of the century. And this thing, the terrible thing, so skews the ability for some people to even evaluate on any kind of creative level the other thing. And understandable, but it makes it very difficult to evaluate the critics. Like, where are they coming from? And the same thing happens, like, trying to figure out, could the Melania documentary have gotten worse reviews if it was Melania, who just happened to be a former model who made it big in the United States, as opposed to one who made it big in the United States, married to that guy? Because the politics were such that it didn't matter what Brett Ratner did to make that movie or how flaccid it was in terms of,
Movie would
her
never
sort of
get made if it wasn't
it
for
would
that.
never get it wouldn't get made for $75 million. I know that. There's that. But it's impossible to separate those things, which makes it very difficult to evaluate the quality of the reviews. And it's like, oh, you just hate Trump. It's like, fine. There's stuff to hate. I get it. But is the film any good? Does it have any window into this
Were you
person who's been
watching
very
the,
opaque?
Denver, Minnesota NBA playoff game where KABC cuts into coverage of the, Correspondence dinner? And I guess there was an active shooter last night, allegedly,
Yeah.
who came through and
No, no, there was a shooter. There were a lot of witnesses. There was shots fired. So
I'll just say staged was a trending term on X last night. But I have no, neither nor
well,
that.
there are now, for what it's worth, there are people who are MAGA supporters, ardent supporters of the president, who now traffic in conspiracy theories that the whole assassination attempt in Pennsylvania was a hoax, that he got his ear cut, and yes, somebody got shot who was an onlooker, and I think an agent was injured as well, but that it was and the shooter was killed. But, that's a pretty high stakes hoax, I gotta say. But
Yeah.
there are people who believe conspiracy theories on the right, who used to be supporters of Trump, but who are mad at Trump now. So this one, I mean, he could have been going after the journalists too. It's just a collection of,
Just
let's
speak
just say it's a target-rich environment.
TV event. The president gets up there, orates for about 20 minutes, going everywhere. Finally, he gets to his ballroom. If we have the ballroom, we get greater security. Then we really need the ballroom. And that's where this is all going. That's bizarre.
Right, right.
It was kind of like a kind of high wire moment where Biden was doing the debate in 2024, and you realize, wow, this guy's
Gone.
reached a point of mental decay that this is a problem. And I kind of had that feeling last night too. I mean, the signs have been there, but it was
Yeah,
pretty.
there's been a lot of conversation about that. It is interesting. I was, as I have often been in years past, really interested in not watching the White House Correspondence Center. It's called the Nerd Prom because all the ugly people in Washington go there, get dressed up, and make nice
Yeah,
with the people they're
anybody
supposed to be
with
covering.
a real career in journalism wasn't there. So when it came time to questions, it's just like, do you think this guy hated you and wanted to shoot you? It was like, it weren't the sharpest tools in the shed remaining. I don't know who.
Well, some of them are often parties at former subway stations and things like that. But that being, and which is a true story, I kind of really put a damper on the MS Now post-game party that was, kind of it's supposed to be its coming out after the spin-off with Versant, as we like to say, from NBC Universal, which had its own party, by the way. But both those were more subdued, I'm told. I just find it hard to get too excited. And then this year was Trump's going to sit there and say bad things about the press for 15 or 20 or 70 minutes or 2 hours and then leave. And then they'll give out the awards for all the people who took pictures that made Trump look bad or wrote stories that made Trump look bad, which sort of proves Trump's
No,
point,
we
I
got
guess, in
like
some ways.
this sort of unification message. We were all here, Republicans, Democrats, all walks of life. You never hear him say that. It was almost like it felt, kind of like he had a plan to come up there and
Talk about this ballroom. So we could have done it in the ballroom. So, it was something I missed, but my spouse did not because she is an ardent MS Now consumer and a fan and couldn't tear her away. And it's like, I'm going to go upstairs. I just can't hear about the ballroom anymore. And they're threatening to reschedule for 30 days from now. And I'm like, maybe we just say the moment's been missed,
you
but we'll
missed
see
the
what happens.
uh, Minnesota lost Dante DiVincenzo to a Achilles. They lost Anthony Thomas,
Edwards, not Thomas Edwards,
Anthony
Anthony
Edwards
Edwards.
to what looked like a ligament problem. It turns out it wasn't ligaments; it's just a bone bruise. But the injury looked bad. So it's a starting backcourt. They came back and won the game against Denver.
Okay, this is so far from what we were talking about, but okay, sure. Let's take another U-turn then.
I'm just saying I'd rather watch that. I mean, I did this
Oh,
shooting.
you'd rather watch that game. It was a heck of a game. There's no doubt it was a heck of a game to carry on despite the crushing loss of their starting backcourt. Yes, much, much more interesting. By the way, going back to our point about the value of entertainment programming versus live sports programming, for at least a certain tranche
Live
of
sports.
older white males, including the two on this very podcast, yes, that is totally true. I don't know. We call the White House Correspondence Center entertainment programming. It's
Years
something.
past, there has been some.
It has had entertaining moments. There's no doubt about it, but mostly for those who traffic in Schadenfreude at a level that even I can't quite attain. Now, that being said, there are other things going on. So one of the things I found interesting, 3 months into it, new CEO of Microsoft's gigantic game division has done an HBO Max. And just like David Zaslav, our favorite punching bag among Hollywood moguls and mogul wannabes, and dropped Microsoft Gaming as a name and going back to Xbox, which feels so civilized. They're also and this is weird, they're actually cutting the cost of the high-end subscription for the Game Pass from like 27 down to 22, but in doing so are taking out the inclusion of Call of Duty's newest version each year. Will no longer automatically appear within the Game Pass, which was considered to be a major attraction, but also really undercutting the value of what has been the biggest selling game for 2 decades. Last fall, it was not. It was unseated by Battlefield 6, my little favorite compute eater. In terms of the top sales king of the year. I think that Asha Sharma, the new CEO, a former AI executive for Microsoft, former COO of Instacart, I believe, and she's done a lot of stuff. She's obviously a pretty smart cookie. She went back to Xbox because that means something to tens of millions of gamers. just as HBO Max means a lot more than Max does. HBO means a lot. Max doesn't mean anything. I'll be fascinated to see what David Ellison
Been in
does with
20,
the
25
combined
years
operation.
building a brand. I don't understand why you would consider throwing that away. Makes sense to me.
Right. Well, that was kind of her point. So, but also taking Call of Duty out, letting them the new version each year because it gets refreshed and redone in a whole new way each year. Letting that stand alone and let it sell. Because I think you throw it in with the Game Pass, and it's just another game. You've taken it off of Mount Rushmore and just said, yeah, here's another thing you can play alongside, these little things and these other pretty good titles and a few other AAA
Yeah.
titles. Totally took the buzz off of Call of Duty, and
It
their
really
sales suffered.
did.
And I think it was smart.
You also talked about, and this was, I guess, OpenAI's CFO
Yeah.
piped up about
Sarah Fryer. Yeah.
the scarcity of compute. It's such a big issue, the data center issue right now, pro and con. Talk about that.
Well, Sarah Fryer, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer for OpenAI, got on and talked. They asked her about, it was interesting. They asked her about what was the deal with Sora? Why'd you guys pull the plug? You guys launched it 6 months ago. Doing great. It was the #1 on the App Store, getting a lot of attention, drove Hollywood nuts. And then you pulled the plug like 6 months later. And she said, it's a matter of focus. It's like our #1 priority is compute.
I always thought
You
it was let it
cannot.
go. I always,
No, that was the #1 priority was Sora for at least 6 weeks before they cleaned that up a little bit with some guardrails, quote unquote. But, fair warning to Hollywood, it could come back, and you can get to Sora's video generation tools through the higher price subscriptions. Now they're at ChatGPT, well, technically ChatGPT, but with GPT 5.5, you've got access to Sora as a video generation package or stack of tools. Still out there, it's just not packaged in a little social video app that lets you share free on your phone. So it's still out there and still come back. But compute's the thing. And this matters because they can't build these data centers fast enough. People in many places are going, this thing is not creating that many jobs, particularly once it's built. Two, to put something that's got to stay cool is Arizona. I have a daughter who's never warm, and even she is warm in Phoenix. Even she is, and that says something. A data center's got to be kept at like 55 so that all the electrical components don't melt down, all those sensitive electrical components. So, it's like, okay, try to build as fast as we can. Maine's governor vetoed a bill that would have banned new data center
yes,
construction.
it would.
She vetoed that this week. Now, it's hard to I know people in Maine, they're lovely people. Saw one of them at NAB. She's a PR person I deal with regularly, Kristen Canders. I'm aware that there is a very busy, hotly contended race for U.S. Senate that includes the aging, but still pretty vivacious governor of Maine. So I'm not quite sure what the politics were that led her to veto this. I can't speak authoritatively on it, but I found it interesting in the middle of that campaign to unseat, I think, Olympia Snow.
Yeah.
No, not. It's one of the moderate Republicans who's Angus
No, it's
King's
not a
colleague there.
politically inconsequential veto. That gets a lot of attention and
It's a
obvious.
lot of attention, and in that state, it's a lot of attention, but well beyond that state. And so it won't be the last bill to float up. That's for damn sure. And it'll be fascinating to see how these things play out. I also don't know if there was like little things in that bill that were problematic. Gavin Newsom vetoed plenty of bills that politically looked like they should be no-brainers, but they had bits in them. It was like, nah, probably shouldn't let that get through because somebody stuck it on there because they could. And you're like, okay, that's a poison pill kind of thing. So we don't know. But the point is, data centers are creating a thing that is the mother's milk of AI compute, and we can't build data centers fast enough, and we may not want them to build them as fast as they are. And all this gets wrapped up in complicated things like competition with China, which is just cranking up the coal-fired plants again now that they can't get oil out of Iran. So it's really, really quite a
China
time,
actually has a lot of next generation energy, a lot of solar. a lot
Yes,
of
they do. They are way ahead of us on solar. Um, you've got an issue about getting it to the places where the data centers are, and you've got a bunch of mothballed coal-fired plants,
Iran
and you're no
prosperous
longer getting as much traditional stuff. All the money they put into solar is fantastically important. It's a country of 1.35 billion people, roughly. Turns out they need stuff like power, and they can't get enough oil. They can't get enough out of Russia, and they can't get enough anymore out of Iran for the moment. So
gambit. The FTC kind of takes it seriously, others don't, but you put a constellation, I've heard of up to 1,000,000 satellites, which is a crazy number, but you put all the compute on these satellites, which they're the cold of space, they're powered by the sun, and you get rid of the terrestrial concerns of all this environmental damage.
I'm curious about how much spectrum you need up and down from those data centers to do the job. A million floating data centers still means you only have so much spectrum. Maybe they'll get some from broadcast because they'll all be out of business. Who knows? But, is there that much room in the C band and some of the other stuff to do that? Is it really feasible, or is that just Elon spouting crazy numbers again?
It sounds
Because he
like the
does
latter,
that.
but it's kind of, Hail Mary science in this one.
Hail Mary science when we saw how that went. But anyway,
We did the audiobook on the way to, Las Vegas last week. It's really good.
Andy Weir's book,
Yeah.
Project Hail Mary? Okay. All right. That's cool. What did we do? We listened to a podcast, but I can't remember what it was. It was so memorable, but it was good. It was good. I still recommend strongly the podcast about the history of Formula One for anybody who's sort of interested in how that thing got what it is, because it is an unlikely history. And for something that is now stinking really big, and again, one of those live sports events that has huge cultural cachet and following around the world, and somehow did that in the most unlikely fashion possible. So,
One more thing before we depart. You brought it up again, in the flagship, but I had mentioned it on Thursday. The trailer for Coyote versus Acme is out, and
yes.
it got over 25 million views in its first day on servers, according to, the handlers, which they purchased it from Warner Brothers, who shelved the thing for tax purposes a few years ago.
Yeah, they were gonna write it off. It was a $90 million film. They were gonna write it off, I think. Or maybe that was Batgirl. Zaslav had a bunch of stuff. He had all his debt. He had a bunch of things he didn't really like that much, or the Batgirl was from a previous iteration of the DC Entertainment Universe.
Right.
And so that was problematic in the whole franchise universe building mindset of Hollywood. This one, kind of a hybrid, live action and animation overlaid, like Who Killed Roger Rabbit.
Well, you pointed out, and I found the link to it, the 1990.
Yeah, the original
Ian
book
Friedman was the guy who
or
was Steve
story.
Fraser.
Ian Fraser, yeah, New Yorker.
Uh, humor essay, sort of looking at a legal
Yeah.
case put forward by, I guess, the Coyote.
Yeah, it's a product liability case by one aggrieved and very hungry candid against a company that keeps making products that keep not working for him and leading him into disastrous injuries as he goes over a cliff and poof, poof,
We take that
or into a
concept,
wall, or
you
it blows
modernize
up.
it with, like, John Cena, who is like the new Rock, this likable lug that
Right.
isn't that appeals to family audiences. And you do what everybody talks about in the video business, which is take these sort of archival remnants in the far reaches of your library and you modernize them and you monetize them, which is what everybody wants to do. It seemed like something that you'd look for other things to get tax write-offs on. So I'm glad it made the theaters. David Green, the director, I have a connection. I'm trying to get him on our pod, so stay tuned for that.
Okay.
Long shot that's going to happen.
Well, it comes out in late August, like the 28th, I think. And it's not difficult to read some of it in the passage of time as a critique of people like David Zaslav, who not only mothballed the thing but wouldn't even sell it to anybody else until 2 years ago, until 2024, after it sat for 2 years. And Ketchup Entertainment bought it, and they picked up a couple other things,
I'm looking
and
forward to it. I'm happy to see
released.
it in a theater. I'll be there.
Yeah, we'll see how it does. I mean, Looney Tunes' previous films have been the last 3 have not been great, but this one gets a little extra nudge because people were and it's supposed to be I mean, the early word is pretty positive, it's supposed to be pretty smart, fun. Again, Ian Fraser, a wonderful humorist who's written for decades now. I mean, this is a 35-year-old story he wrote, which is astonishing to think about. A very funny
Yeah,
guy, bone dry,
had the pleasure
humor.
of watching the rough, version of Space Jam back in '96. I was working for the
Mm.
WWB in their promotions department, and you
The
had to
WWB? Is
that's right.
this the Worldwide Brothers, or what was
Yes.
that?
Worked for, Bob Bibb and Lou Goldstein, the kind of
Okay.
masterminds the Fox broadcasting strategy under Rupert Murdoch. They've been brought in to build the WB, and I got hired for some low-level job, but they called Bibb liked me for some reason, called me in to watch with sort of this
Figure
murderer's
that out.
this was like when broadcast networks were broadcast networks and all this and these guys were like scarfing turkey sandwiches as fast as they can eat them. I remember one going, Bill Murray's so fucking funny. And I'm watching this thing and I'm going, there's not one funny aspect of this movie. It never appealed to me because it's just that the premise of like Marvin the Martian and Bugs Bunny playing basketball with the very serious Michael Jordan just didn't seem like comedy to me.
Right. Noted thespian Michael Jordan, who I don't he was kind of hard to get him to say anything in his vaunted career. I mean, this is a man who studiously avoided controversy, conversation, anything.
Yeah, like
So that's an actor you can't wait to hear from, alongside a lot of energy from the usual Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes cast of suspects. So
have you seen Blake Griffin? Speaking of former NBA players as a pitchman, he's
kind
fantastic.
of hard to avoid him if you're watching sports on certain networks. He is on the show. He is in at least 2 or 3 different ads for different companies. I mean, he's
Hey,
kind
look,
of omnipresent. I never saw that coming.
if he's the new Rob Gronkowski who just like, "Oh, I'm big and stupid," that was his gear. Blake has a little
Right.
couple of like he has some nuanced potential. He's got
Yeah,
some
no, he's got some nuance. And by the way, so does John Cena. John Cena,
sure.
Lovable Lug, is actually a very good comic actor. I will say he's got a touch, and you did not expect that from a former wrestler. But he's got a light touch. I mean, Peacemaker is a very smart, funny show, for instance, and he does that very well. So it can happen. So maybe Blake Griffin will be the next one. He will jump over a car and make a joke while he's slam dunking a phone. That'll be
That's right. Didn't he do that for Kia? Was that the thing? Is that what we're
I think the car was a Kia back in the day, and he won the slam dunk contest that year for literally doing his dunk over a convertible just to make it easy. But still, not that easy. It was pretty impressive when his knees were still working and everything, and he was still a young man at 23 or 4 or whatever. He had pogo sticks in those legs, so, yeah, that was memorable. Back when the All-Star Game mattered. It wasn't just part of Legendary February for NBC Universal, now to be known as, Comcast, etcetera. So, anyway, with that, we probably should wrap this puppy up. I
what's
am
up?
David Bloom. I am David Bloom. He's Daniel Frankel. We are co-founders of Next TMT, and this is your podcast, Next TMT Talks. You can find us at nexttmt.com and get our newsletter delivered free to your mailbox every Monday morning and Wednesdays on Thursday mornings, technically. And our podcast is available on YouTube and on Apple and Spotify and all major purveyors of fantastic audio and video entertainment everywhere. Please like, share, subscribe, all those things. Comments. We take comments. We try to keep our egos intact, and you are there to help. And thank you for everything. This is Next TMT Talks, David Bloom, over and out.